party and bullshit and
Good work, Charlie.
party and bullshit and party and bullshit and party and bullshit and party and bullshit and
I was a terror since a